The request came in on a frequency I hadn't checked in 6 years. I was 3 weeks from retirement. My office at Veth Anchorage was a converted storage bay with one working viewport and a desk that had been bolted to the floor by someone who no longer worked here. I had 18 open manifests to close, a handover brief to write for my replacement, and a cup of something the galley called coffee. The request sat in my queue between a fuel allocation dispute and a scheduled docking confirmation, flagged routine by the automated triage system because the sender had filed it in the standard humanitarian transit format, column by column, every box filled in correctly. I almost didn't open it. The Orith convoy was sitting in dead space, 4 hours beyond the Conclave's enforcement line, 18 vessels, ranging from a pair of battered long-haul freighters to a colony transport, old enough that I recognized the hull configuration from a manual I'd studied at the academy. 14,211 people. The filing listed them by name. Dispersal Convoy 7, registered under the Conclave's Reclassification Directive 44. Status, pending internment transfer. I knew what Directive 44 was. Everyone in logistics knew. 6 months ago, the Conclave had reclassified the Orith, an entire trade caste people, smooth-skinned, dusky violet, who had run cargo routes through the mid-reaches for 4 centuries, as a threat caste. The legal mechanism was obscure. Something about a genetic proximity clause to a species that had once raised arms against the Conclave 40 years back. The Orith had not raised arms. The Orith had not done anything. But the clause was in the treaty, and the Conclave had exercised it, and every allied species had complied. Because the alternative was a diplomatic incident they weren't willing to have. The convoy had been sitting in dead space for 11 days. They had filed transit requests with 7 jurisdictions. 6 had returned formal denials. 1, the Thessaly Communion, had not responded at all. They had found the Earth Humanitarian Logistics Authority's frequency in a 40-year-old trade appendix. The annotation next to it read, "Response not guaranteed." I sat with the filing open on my screen for a long time. Then I picked up the routing authorizer and started working. The 3 reserve transports were mine to assign. They were sitting at Veth Anchorage doing nothing useful. I had flagged them twice for redeployment and been ignored. And understanding, Humanitarian Operations Authority, I had the clearance to task them without escalation. If I judged a situation time critical, I judged it time critical. I wrote the orders, countersigned them with my own authority code, and transmitted before I could think too carefully about what I was doing. The hospital ship was harder. The ECS Ardent Passage was technically under Fleet Medical's jurisdiction, docked at Veth for a resupply rotation. I called the duty officer, a young lieutenant named Kale, who sounded like she hadn't slept, and explained what I needed. There was a long pause. Then she said she'd need to check with her commanding officer. I told her I had 11 days of people sitting in dead space, and I didn't have time. Chain of command that morning. There was another pause, and then she said she'd patch the Ardent Passage through. The warship escort was the piece that required nerve. The ECS Veth's Reach was a patrol cruiser assigned to corridor security. And corridor security, under Standing Defense Authority, included the right to position alongside humanitarian convoys operating in disputed approach lanes. I called Captain Dorvith directly. He had 17 years in. He listened to me for 90 seconds, asked one question: how many kids? And I told him I didn't have a breakdown by age, but that a 14,000-person colony transport usually ran about 30% under 12. He said he'd have his ship in position within 2 hours. I thanked him. He said, "Don't thank him. Just make sure the paperwork was clean." I sent the authorization to the Orith convoy's lead vessel and began writing the paperwork. The Conclave's interdiction order arrived 40 minutes later. It was formalta, correctly formatted, and addressed to the Earth Humanitarian Logistics Authority, Veth Anchorage Station. Attention. Senior Logistics Commander. I was the Senior Logistics Commander. The order cited Directive 44, enumerated the Orith convoy's reclassified status, and instructed me to cease all humanitarian transit facilitation pending formal review by the Conclave Oversight Committee. The estimated timeline for formal review was listed as 90 to 120 days. I read the order. I logged it as received, timestamped, acknowledgement code, the full protocol. Then I went back to routing the corridor. The Conclave enforcement cruiser Vel Osath arrived at the boundary line 40 minutes after that. It was a large ship. I had the data from Veth Anchorage's passive array, and I looked at it for a moment, noted its armament class in my working log, and then sent a positioning update to Captain Dorvith. He replied, "Understood, on station." The Veth's Reach moved up alongside the convoy's lead ship. The 3 transports took flanking positions. The Ardent Passage slid into the convoy's center lane. I transmitted the corridor clearance to the Orith lead vessel and watched tracking display on my desk screen. I did not know, at that moment, what it looked like from inside the Orith convoy. I learned later, the navigator of the lead ship wrote a deposition for the Conclave's formal test filing, and a copy found its way into my agency's records. That her name was Vayan Seld, that she had been standing at her console for 11 days running probability calculations, and that by the morning my clearance arrived, she had stopped running them. She told the deposition that she had expected nothing. She used that word specifically, nothing, not hope deferred, not diminishing hope, nothing. The Thessery had not answered. The Andral had declined. The 7 jurisdictions had declined or been silent. She had filed the Earth request because there was a frequency, and she had not yet filed on it, and there was still one more form to complete, before there were no more forms, and so she completed it. When the corridor clearance came through, she thought it was an error. When the positioning data updated and she saw the 3 transports, she thought it was a different kind of error. A misfold convoy assignment. Ships that didn't know they were in the wrong place. When the Ardent Passage moved into the center lane with its medical identification lights on, she said she stood very still for a while and did not say anything. The Vel Osath held position at the boundary line for 2 hours and 19 minutes. Then it withdrew. The official reason filed with the Conclave was insufficient grounds for hostile interdiction of human-flagged vessels in a declared humanitarian corridor. The real reason, I suspect, is that Captain Dorvith looked like exactly what he was. A man who had been in corridors like this before and had no intention of moving. The convoy entered human space at 14:17 hours, station time, 10,211 people. The Ardent Passage reported 34 medical cases requiring immediate attention, malnutrition, dehydration, 1 critical respiratory case, 3 births that had occurred during the 11-day hold. The doctors handled it. They were good at their jobs. They didn't need me. The Conclave's formal protest reached my director's office the following morning. I was called in. My director was a careful woman named Rose Santis, who had navigated 17 years of interspecies logistics without a diplomatic incident, and she looked at me across her desk for a long time before she spoke. She asked me if I understood what I had done. I said I had routed a humanitarian convoy through a declared corridor under standing operational authority. She said, the Conclave was calling it interference in a reclassification proceeding. I said the Conclave's estimated review timeline was 90 to 120 days, and the convoy had 11 days of life support remaining when I filed the clearance. She looked at me for another long moment. Then she asked me if the paperwork was clean. I told her Captain Dorvith had asked the same question, and that yes, it was clean. She said she would handle the protest. She said it in the tone of someone who has already decided how they are going to handle it. I thanked her. She told me to go finish my handover brief. I closed all 18 manifests. I wrote the brief. On the last page of the operational log, in the remarks field, I filed the corridor run under completed actions with a single status note. The form asked for a classification. Emergency humanitarian, scheduled resupply or other. I checked other and wrote, convoy transit, 14,211 persons, no incident. The Conclave's reclassification, proceeding for the Orith, has been in formal review for 4 months now. The Orith are housed in temporary residency at 3 stations inside human space while it proceeds. The Ardent Passage rotated out. The Veth's Reach went back on corridor patrol. I retired on schedule. I have a viewport in my apartment that looks out over a transit hub, and sometimes I watch the ships come and go. I don't know what word the Orith have for what happened to them. Seld's deposition used a phrase in her own language that the translation system rendered as the act of being received. as though being helped were not something done to you, but something you were brought inside of. I think that's about right. We received them. That's what the paperwork says. That's what it was.